peer learning and information processing in the classroom, and the application of constructivist methods for teaching sight words. The target audience for this is preps to up to year 2. And I'm going to start with a couple of quotes that align to my own personal beliefs. The first is, if students discover the connections between their learning in a meaningful context, they will be able to make sense of, remember and apply what they have learned. The second one is, learners are active participants in their learning. Learning by doing is central to constructivism in practice. So why sight words? Well, 100 sight words represent about 50% of the words we read and write, and approximately 300 represent about 75% of the words we read and write. As for why we're using constructive methods, I've used them successfully with my son in prep, who learned to read and spell at least 100 words in 8 weeks or less. And I believe it provides a foundation and a confidence for further learning. So the key principles that this is based upon are really cognitive learning theories, the multi-store mode of information processing, and social constructivism. So cognitive learning theories, key concepts really is the zone of proximal development, and by Lev Vygotsky. The key concept here is really there are 3 zones. Children can do certain things without help. There are other things that they may be able to do, but they need some assistance. And there's the stuff that they can't do even with help. And probably the analogy for this would be somebody older obviously, would be a learner driver. So a learner driver can drive with an instructor when they first start, but they wouldn't be able to do it on their own. If you were to put that same person in an aeroplane and ask them to fly a plane, even with help, they wouldn't be able to do it. The second concept is really that knowledge is constructed by the learner's experiences. So the second concept is really the multi-store mode of information processing, which is how we remember information. The first bit of that is really it represents our mental processes. So there are 3 compartments of memory. There's sensory memory, working memory, and long-term memory, and each of these interacts with each other. So environmental stimuli go to the sensory memory. It's only retained for a short period of time. If we pay attention to it, then we will transfer some of that information into our working short-term memory. But there's only a limited amount of storage capacity there. And strategies such as rehearsal help us to retain that information, and then there's a process by which information goes into long-term memory, which is encoding, and the process by which we retrieve that is called retrieval. The second concept that developed up from that is really the concept of the central executive or the executive control systems, and really this is looking at 3 key elements really. The inhibitory control, which is the ability to resist an inclination to do something that you want to do and instead stay on task. The second thing is working memory, again, the ability to hold that information. The last one is hold information while you're working and updating it. And the third one is cognitive flexibility, the ability to switch perspectives or the focus of attention. And this is something that develops with age and time, and research has shown that it plays a executive control system, and executive control itself plays a big element in academic performance. And the last one really, which kind of builds upon those previous theories, which is what a lot of this work is based on, is social constructivism, which is really the concept being that social interaction shapes cognitive development, and children and people learn by doing. So it draws on Vygotsky's belief that social processes are integral to learning. It does reject the view that knowledge lies solely within the individual, and emphasizes the role of social and cultural learning, cultural factors in shaping learning. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. I've shown a few different ways in which that's represented. Really, the concept here that I'm trying to show is that these particular activities really, at least the ones that I'm providing here, are really aimed at the lower order thinking skills, the ability to remember, understand and apply. But there is an opportunity, or there are opportunities to develop this work so that children can actually design and create their own learning games from this and access the higher order thinking skills. So what are the peer-assisted learning objectives? Maybe I should start by saying what peer-assisted learning is. So peer-assisted learning is about pairing children up together so that they work together and develop social skills. The idea is that we create a fun, safe learning environment for them, and the focus on sight words is to develop a strong foundation for early literacy skills. So the process that they will go through would be to read the words, spell the words aloud, copy the words, remember the words, write the words. And the peer-assisted teaching guidelines here are that you need to develop and implement guidelines for the group and pair work before you start, and carefully train the students in the skills that are required to work in the groups, and negotiate activities and assessments to encourage student involvement. A key thing to remember is to make sure that the classroom is arranged to promote that group interaction, and teachers are expected to regularly monitor the students' skills, interactions and achievements. It's important to be active in this process and to capitalize on the learner strengths and abilities by establishing peer-assisted learning experiences. So in this particular game, it's a peer tutoring word game. We have a number of roles. So there are word makers who write. So everybody starts by writing out the assigned words onto flashcards, and then the children take turns between themselves. One is the player, where they have to spell the word out loud, and then there's the quizmaster who reads and checks that. And the children play around and they swap around, and once they are confident that they have learnt and they can spell those words, then there's an opportunity for the teacher to test the children, and if they can show that they've learned it, then they then move on to the next row of flashcards. And this is something that really should be done for maybe 30-40 minutes each day, rather than any longer than that's probably too much. The idea is that the children level up. You can mix up the children into different groups as well, and you progress through the levels of words: red, orange, yellow, etc. So the peer tutoring approach is to start with red words, group everyone into pairs, provide materials for the spelling game, make sure you explain the rules of the game, the children create the tools for the game, the children take turns, you assess, progress, and introduce new games slowly. So the constructive strengths around this it has wide support both from teachers and from research. The idea really that learners are constructors of meaning, that they're actively seeking to discover and learn. They're encouraged to participate in the learning versus being just a passive recipient. It also attaches importance to prior learning and background knowledge, and teachers work with that student knowledge to make links between what the students know and what they need to know. So some other great strengths are that social and cultural heritage is valued in the constructivist approach. Social networks are seen as important in constructive learning environments, and value is attached to the dialogues and interactions among students. And there's also scope for parents and community member involvement as well. Many of these things are activities that you can that the children can take home, and parents can be involved in as well. So the limitations, that there are a range of them, and I'm not going to read through every line here because there are really common threads. Really, probably the key points here from Brown and Rose were that even teachers that were knowledgeable about their approach didn't always adopt it widely because they felt they didn't have sufficient time or didn't feel confident about managing that discovering learning process with other curriculum demands. Similar comments from a number of the others. Really, time is a key factor here. The fact the time it takes to set them up, that they need to provide sufficient scaffolding to support the structures to facilitate that constructivist learning. And there's also the need to monitor groups closely. So discovery learning can be frustrating for less confident learners. There's a risk of uncertainty. And there's also the risk that students can go down unplanned thinking pathways. I mean, Rowe argued that that constructivism is a well-established theory of learning, not a theory of teaching. But his point really was more about to highlight the fact that students can't be left on their own. That they need intervention, guidance from the teacher. And the last criticisms or comments really from Lockeran were that the students need to feel safe to ask questions, and that can take time to develop that safe and supportive learning environment. I'll finish this off by providing a link to SiteWords Games that gives lots of ideas about how to run this. Thank you very much.